I'm granting Scarlett Miller use of the house until the children finish high school. Mr. Miller will remain responsible for the mortgage and utility payments. Additionally, she will receive half the value of her husband's business. Miss Miller will keep her vehicle, with Mr. Miller continuing to cover the payments. Furthermore, Mrs. Miller will be awarded 60% of all assets, including bank accounts, investments, and retirement funds. Mrs. Miller is awarded primary custody of the children, with Mr. Miller having visitation rights every other weekend and 2 consecutive weeks in the summer. Child support will be set at $750 per child, totaling $1,500 a month. Due to Mrs. Miller not having worked outside the home for the last 5 years, I'm also granting her maintenance of $2,000 per month. The divorce will be finalized in 90 days unless Mr. Miller withdraws his petition. With that, Judge Chloe Wilson hammered the gavel, signaling the end of the proceedings. Just as she was rising from her seat, I spoke the word that would completely reshape the months ahead of my life. No. Judge Wilson froze mid-motion. Her head whipped around so fast, I half expected to hear it snap. Her expression was a blend of shock and disbelief, as though she couldn't comprehend that someone had dared to defy her. Slowly, she sank back into her chair, her eyes narrowing into a glare so cold, it could have frozen fire. The anger radiating off her was palpable. "Excuse me?" she spat. "Not sure what's confusing. Do you not understand the word, no? I can define it for you if you'd like." Her eyes flared. "I'm not stupid. I know what's happening here. And frankly, I couldn't care less," I replied nonchalant. "I've been waiting for this moment. You have exactly 1 minute to apologize, or I'll hold you in contempt of court," she warned, her voice icy. "Well, at least that'll be the first ruling you've gotten right today. This whole process is a joke." My lawyer was hissing frantically into my ear, shuffling through his briefcase like he was searching for something to tape my mouth shut. "In that case," she said with a sneer, 30 days in jail for contempt." I chuckled. "Looks like we're in Australia now, with all these kangaroos hopping around this courtroom." My lawyer was nearly shouting at me to shut up, his hand inching toward my mouth to silence me. 60 days. Keep going if you like." The judge shot back, her temper flaring even more. I gave her a deadpan stare. "You know, your dishonor. I truly think that if you got laid once in a while, you wouldn't be such a—" I paused, raising my right hand and flipping her off. "And you can shove this right where the sun don't shine." I extended my other hand, flipping her off with both fingers now. "As for the other, it's for your tight, constipated you-know-what. Maybe then you'd be less of a bitter, man-hating psycho." I could have sworn the judge's head was about to explode. Her face had turned a shade of red I didn't think was humanly possible, and if looks could kill, I'd have been vaporized right there on the spot. 90 days, she growled, her voice sounding downright demonic. Luckily for my lawyer, that's when the bailiff stepped in and took hold of me. He looked so pitiful. I almost felt bad for him. Everyone in the courtroom stared in shock when I just couldn't contain myself anymore and burst out laughing. That probably explains why the psychologists visited me during my time in lockup over the next couple of weeks. The letter from my lawyer's firm dropping me as a client arrived the next day. Not exactly a shocker. Now, you might be wondering what led up to all of that. So, let me give you a little context. My name's Theo Miller, and I'm 31 years old. I grew up in a nice, middle-class family right in the heartland of America. I was raised on strong, traditional values. Knowing right from wrong, respecting those who earned it, and never cheating. Promise meant something. You worked hard, shared what you had, and stuck to your principles. The golden rule, right? Treat others as you'd want to be treated. Of course, there's a flip side to that. Treat people the way they treat you. Turning the other cheek. That never really worked for me. I've always been stubborn. People have said so my whole life. Combine that with a strong sense of justice and, well, things could get ugly fast. If someone wronged me and I decided to do something about it, nothing could steer me off that path. Take high school, for example. I was dating Hannah Evans. We'd been together a couple of months when we had an argument. I don't even remember what it was about now. Words were exchanged, and we broke up. I put that in quotes because back then we both knew it wasn't permanent. We'd cool off over the weekend and get back together, like we always did. But then Saturday night came around. I was walking by the theater when I saw my cousin, Rowan, taking Hannah inside. Now, let me fill you in on two things. Rowan and I were like brothers growing up. Same age, lived just down the block, practically inseparable. And second, I knew he liked Hannah too. He knew we'd broken up, but he also knew we'd probably get back together after the weekend. He just didn't care, and that's something you don't do. From that point on, he was dead to me. When Hannah tried to talk to me on Monday, I completely ignored her. On Sunday at church, Rowan approached me, trying to explain himself, but I just stared at him, said nothing, and walked away. When his family came over for Sunday dinner, I ignored him again. Even when he tried to play video games with me, I just quit and went to my room. Our parents made several attempts to patch things up between us, but I refused every single time. Even a year later, when I stole his girlfriend, I still wouldn't speak to him. Oh, and when he confronted me about it, I kicked his ass. Years later, he sent me an invitation to his wedding. I ignored it, and when I got married to Scarlett, everyone in the extended family was invited, except him. So yeah, I can hold a grudge, and I won't deny it. If someone wrongs me, I don't forgive unless it was an honest mistake. Rowan and Hannah knew exactly what they were doing. Some of you might think I'm being an a-hole. If that's the case, let me piss you off even more. I firmly believe in facing the consequences of your actions. Don't do the crime if you can't handle the punishment. If you drive drunk and get caught, you lose your license, pay higher insurance, and serve your community service. Simple as that. If your job depends on driving, well, you lose your job. I call it the stupid tax. And if a girl decides to sleep around without protection and ends up pregnant at 18, her stupid tax is motherhood for the next 18 years. Likewise, if a guy knocks up his prom date, he's on the hook to man up and take care of the child. Actions have consequences, and it's called personal responsibility. I'm not paying for someone else's stupidity. I worked hard in high school, kept my grades up, and earned some solid scholarships. I got into college, did okay with the ladies, and still managed to keep my academics on track. I was decent looking, stayed in shape, and women seemed to notice. Yeah, I got into a few fights because of my beliefs, but I won more than I lost. I graduated with a degree in economics and a minor in accounting. Then I went on to earn my MBA and landed a good-paying job at a big company. Being single and having few bills to worry about, I started playing around in the stock market. Turns out I had a talent for it, and I did pretty well. A few months into the job, I met Scarlett at a party. We hit it off and I asked her out. She said yes, and things just took off from there. I got to admit, she's stunning. I laugh when I think about that. Who doesn't call their girlfriend beautiful? Sure, maybe someone else doesn't see it, but to you, she's gorgeous. Scarlett really is, though. Heads turn when we go out, and my friends constantly joke about trying to swoop in if we ever break up. Even some of my lesbian friends have mentioned they'd try to turn her if the chance ever came. Eventually, I proposed, and she said yes. We got married. Scarlett went to college too, though I like to joke she went for her MRS degree. She didn't land that, but she did graduate with a degree in art history, which qualified her to work as a barista at Starbucks. For those unfamiliar, an MRS degree is what you call it when a girl goes to college just to put off real life and graduate with a husband to support her. Yeah, I know I'm an arrogant jerk. We settled into married life smoothly. A week before the wedding, Scarlett quit her job and embraced her new role as Susie Homemaker. Our sex life was fantastic, and we bought ourselves a nice 3-bedroom house. I was thriving at work and making great money in the stock market. We weren't living extravagantly, so we saved a good amount. Every bonus I got went straight into investments, and I maxed out my 401k contributions. My goal was to retire before I turned 40 and live the good life. I was damn good at what I did, and my company rewarded me with generous bonuses and quick promotions. I was well on my way up the corporate ladder. A few years into our marriage, I came home from work one Friday to find Scarlett all dressed up, grinning from ear to ear. "Hurry up and get showered and changed. We're celebrating tonight, Daddy," she said. Wait, did she just say what I think she said? I was stunned. We had been trying for a few months, but hearing her say it out loud caught me off guard. I grabbed her and spun her around, planting kisses all over her face. Since we figured our wild nights out would be on hold for a while with the pregnancy and baby on the way, we made the most of that night and hit the town. The next few months were filled with joy as we prepared for our new addition. But then, another surprise came. Twins. We were having 2 little girls. I was over the moon, already picturing them as daddy's girls, wrapped around my fingers. Life couldn't get any better. When the day finally arrived, we rushed to the hospital. A few hours later, our beautiful, healthy twin daughters were born. They had all their fingers and toes and were perfect. They had to stay in the hospital for a couple of extra days since they were twins, but everything was fine. When we brought them home, both sides of the family were there to greet us. Everyone was thrilled. My mom, especially, couldn't take her eyes off them. She had been waiting for grandkids for so long, and now they were finally here. Life changed fast. I realized working at the big company was taking too much time away from my family. With a nice pot of money saved, I decided to start my own company. I'd been doing well with my investments, so I got licensed and opened my own investment firm. A few friends and family members I'd already been helping came on board as official clients, and that got the ball rolling. Within the year, I had a solid client list and word was spreading. Former colleagues moved their portfolios to me, and their friends were starting to do the same. When you're on top, the only way left to go is down. It was the girl's 2nd birthday and we went all out. It was a massive party, even though they wouldn't remember it. We filmed everything so they could enjoy it when they were older. Both sides of the family were there, and everyone was having a great time. I had just stepped out of the bedroom after using the ensuite bathroom, as the hall one was occupied, when I overheard my mom talking to her sister in the hallway. "I just can't figure out where those blue eyes came from," my mom said. "Have you asked Michael about it?" My aunt replied. "Oh no. I can't imagine what would happen if he found out they aren't his. He's so happy. It would probably destroy him." I couldn't listen to any more. Silently, I retraced my steps and locked myself in the bathroom. My mind was racing. They had to be mine, right? Surely someone in the family had blue eyes. I went through mental snapshots of everyone. My eyes were a dull brown, and Scarlett's were hazel. The only family member I could think of with non-brown eyes was my cousin Mary. But her eyes were green, and that was from her father's side, not blood-related. I ran through Scarlett's family next. No one had blue eyes there either. I stayed in the bathroom for a while, trying to calm myself down. Eventually, I managed to pull it together enough to rejoin the party without raising any suspicions. It was tough, but I played the part everyone expected. All the while, I was mentally working out what I was going to do later. That evening, after everyone had left and we put the girls to bed, I studied their faces closely. I saw features that clearly came from Scarlett, but there were others I didn't recognize. None of them looked like they came from me. The next day, while Scarlett napped with the girls, I got on my computer. I ordered some supplies for my office using a company credit card so she wouldn't see the invoice. I also researched local private investigation firms. The suspicion that Scarlett might have cheated on me nearly 3 years ago was growing stronger by the minute. And if she had, who's to say she wasn't still doing it? I needed proof. A few days later, my supplies arrived. I had also hired a firm called Pro Investigations. I gave them all the information they needed to access Scarlett's phone, tablet, and laptop. At the same time, I began making some financial moves. If it turned out she hadn't cheated and the girls were mine, it wouldn't matter. But if what I suspected was true, then those moves would put all the money out of her reach. I wasn't about to pay for her fun on the side, and I sure as hell wasn't going to support someone else's kids. Yeah, the girls were innocent in all of this, but so was I. If she wanted to fool around and get knocked up by someone else, then let him foot the bill. There were no definitive plans yet, but anticipation hung in the air. It was 2 weeks later when a letter arrived at my office. Ensuring the door was both closed and locked, I opened it. The news it contained brought me to tears for a solid hour. The children were not mine. Although a part of me had already suspected this, I clung to the hope that I was mistaken. The following day, my private investigator met with me, providing irrefutable evidence. The man was her personal trainer, blonde-haired with blue eyes, and she continued to see him several times a week. Astonishingly, she even took our daughters to his apartment so he could spend time with his biological children. The audio recordings cemented that they both acknowledged the true paternity. Knowing what lay ahead, I scheduled a meeting with a divorce lawyer the next afternoon. I was no fool. I braced myself for a legal battle that would leave me with little dignity or recompense. The lawyer offered his counsel, which I promptly rebuffed. He detailed the legal ramifications, but I countered with my own terms. He emphasized the priority of the children's welfare, to which I agreed. They could be cared for by their mother and her partner, without any involvement from me or my finances. I laid out my conditions and departed. My lawyer likely began questioning his decision to take me on as a client. Unbeknownst to him, I instructed him to draft the documents but to refrain from filing them until I gave the go-ahead. My feigned intention to reconcile might have misled him. All right, I blatantly lied about that. It took 2 months for everything to be discreetly finalized. My wife remained blissfully unaware of any brewing conflict. My acting skills, honed in a drama class during my junior year, had served me well. On paper, I now possessed no income and no assets, with the exception of an encumbered house and an old Chevy pickup. The house, burdened with a heavy mortgage due to recent refinancing for improvements, would scarcely cover brokerage fees if sold. Though I drove a Lexus, it belonged to the company, not to me personally. I had stashed away $10,000 in cash to tide me over for the coming months. The weekend when my cousin Owen and his wife Hannah visited, Scarlett was taken by surprise. I told her that Owen and Hannah had visited my office a few weeks prior. After a series of candid conversations, they admitted their past mistakes and earnestly apologized. I chose to forgive them. Honestly, folks are so easily misled. Yes, we reconciled. Owen and Hannah did come to my office last week, and they apologized. Every bit of that is true. I pride myself on honesty. I did forgive them and welcomed them back into my life. However, a few minor and coincidental details may have been overlooked. Merely coincidences. Hannah's family includes several members who are, let's say, comfortable skirting minor legal boundaries. Some are rather imposing figures and have no qualms about involving themselves in an occasional bar brawl. Though rumors are not something I indulge in, whispers about 4 or 5 of them possibly working as enforcers for some less than reputable local businessmen persist. These, of course, are merely unfounded speculations by those inclined to gossip. While entirely unrelated to this narrative, it's worth mentioning that shortly before Owen and Hannah visited, a news story reported that a personal trainer from a local gym was mugged after work. Foolishly, he tried to fend off 5 assailants. In addition to having his wallet and car stolen and being stripped, he endured a severe beating, resulting in multiple injuries. His hospital stay was expected to last several weeks. The local police really ought to address the rising crime in our area. The local crime situation was growing increasingly concerning, with the police unable to pinpoint any suspects given that the culprits wore dark clothing, gloves, and ski masks. The doctors mentioned that, despite needing reconstructive facial surgery and extensive physical therapy, the blonde-haired, blue-eyed victim was expected to recover. However, it was unlikely he'd ever regain full sexual function. Strangely, Scarlett seemed unusually glum and withdrawn for about a week after the mugging. I assumed she was anxious about the area's rising crime. Though I offered to enhance our home security, it did little to ease her worries. Come Monday morning, I contacted my lawyer to finalize and file the divorce paperwork, insisting that Scarlett be served by late Friday afternoon. Despite his attempts to sway my decision, I stood my ground. By Tuesday, the documents were ready for my signature, and I met with him to wrap everything up. While he cautioned against my chosen path, I decided to humor him. I handed over the house and the investments. Of course, the investment accounts were empty. I had no difficulty giving her 100% of nothing, and the responsibility for the mortgage and utilities was solely hers. Scarlett remained unaware that I had been gradually moving my tools and belongings out of the garage. Most items from my home office, tools, and larger possessions were relocated to Owen and Hannah's ranch. Smaller, less valuable items were moved to a one-bedroom apartment owned by an offshore LLC with elusive ownership. Friday morning finally arrived. I went to work as usual. Earlier in the week, Owen had assisted me in relocating my truck to the office. After dropping off my car, I drove the pickup to the bank. There, I withdrew almost everything, leaving only $100 in the accounts, and emptied the safety deposit box. I took everything to the ranch, knowing I couldn't risk the accounts being discovered or easily tracked. You might wonder why I trusted Owen and Hannah. The answer was simple. The mortgage on their ranch was held by an offshore LLC with opaque ownership. Despite our past problems, family bonds were strong. In our family, betrayal wasn't tolerated. There was a collective sense of contentment when Owen and I reconciled. I returned home late that morning, parking a few blocks away to check the GPS tracker I had placed on Scarlett's car. She was at the mall just as anticipated. I hurriedly parked in the driveway and collected the last of my clothes and belongings, which I had packed in the garage over the previous days. Tossing everything into the truck, I made quick work of emptying my closet and dresser, carrying clothes on hangers by the armful. I didn't bother closing the garage or front doors. As I left, my phone rang. It was Scarlett, likely grappling with her non-functional credit cards. Checking the GPS, I noted she was heading toward the house. I laughed, left my phone on the table, and walked out. Minutes later, I was blocks away. At my new apartment, I swiftly unloaded everything into the appropriate rooms and enjoyed 3 beers once everything was in place. I just settled into my recliner when my new cell phone rang. Only a few people had this number, and Scarlett wasn't one. "Hello?" I answered. "She's been served. You should have the video shortly." The voice informed me. "Okay, thank you," I replied, ending the call. 15 minutes later, I received the footage via email. Scarlett's shock was unmistakable, captured on video until she collapsed to the floor. The server ensured she wasn't injured and then left, with the footage ending shortly thereafter. I was curious about her reaction upon digesting the divorce petition and the included DNA and video proof of her infidelity. From that moment, proceedings crawled at a glacial pace. I got several calls, including multiple attempts from my old office as Scarlett sought to reach me. She refused to believe I had resigned 2 weeks prior. Her eventual visit to the office turned chaotic, necessitating police intervention to escort her off the premises. Owen gave me a call a couple of times, mentioning that Scarlett had been pestering him, trying to track me down. She probably started piecing together that his sudden appearance coinciding with our divorce was no coincidence. Restraining orders were issued for both Owen and my former company, forcing her to back off. It took 2 weeks before my lawyer reached out to her, inquiring about her legal representation, only to discover she hadn't yet secured a lawyer. Her funds were dwindling rapidly. She had little more than the cash in her purse and the $200 I left in our accounts. The financial strain was pushing her to lean on her parents for help. Meanwhile, I was in full relaxation mode, avoiding new projects to ensure nothing was left for her to claim. Eventually, Scarlett hired a lawyer, and meetings were arranged. I refused to attend, choosing instead to relay my instructions to my lawyer. I wouldn't be giving a single penny more. It seems tempers flared during those discussions, leading to arbitration. My presence was required there, but things quickly went south. "Where's all the money?" she demanded. "What money?" I replied nonchalantly. "All our money," she insisted. "We don't have any. We're flat broke. I'm living in the cheapest single-bedroom apartment I could find," I explained. In truth, the place was affordable because I knew the actual owner of the complex. "Our investments, checking, savings gone," she accused. "I made a really bad investment. Does investing in a cheating wife count? Lost it all." I responded partly truthful, since the cash was now shuffled through obscure offshore banks. "We're giving her the house with her name on the title," my lawyer interjected. He could have sounded more assertive, but instead, it was like someone inspecting ruins post-tornado, remarking that at least the rubble hadn't caught fire. "It's mortgaged to the hilt. I can't afford the payments." Scarlett shouted, and things spiraled from there. He could have sounded more assertive, but instead, it was like someone inspecting ruins post-tornado, remarking that at least the rubble hadn't caught fire. It's mortgaged to the hilt. I can't afford the payments. Scarlett shouted, and things spiraled from there. Child support. Not my kids, not my problem. Spousal maintenance. No job, no income, no way. She's demanding 70% of the liquid assets. Search all you want, there's nothing to find. 50% of the business. Good luck with that. 50% of the retirement. What part of lost it all is confusing. Arbitration fell apart, leading us to court. As I foresaw, the proceedings took place under the dispassionate gaze of Judge Chloe Wilson, infamous for her bias against men, especially those whose wives had cheated. Should the roles have been reversed, her retribution was legendary. Needless to say, my hopes were slim. You might think I naively believed I could convince them of our financial destitution. But you'd be mistaken. I fully expected them to examine the financial records from a few months prior, highlighting my assets then. The real challenge was ensuring they couldn't access what was now hidden. I needed time to transfer funds across various banks and accounts. Occasionally, I physically withdrew money from one bank, promptly depositing portions across multiple accounts under different aliases. Hannah's family ran a dubious gag gift operation, specializing in entertainment purposes only fake IDs. I even had one declaring me as Jesus Christ. It was always a hoot when a victim shouted, "Jesus Christ," and I'd flash the ID, playing along. The quality was impressive, with only the entertainment label hinting at their inauthenticity. Normally, they sold for about $50, but for a bit more, they conveniently omitted the entertainment disclaimer. I then electronically moved the money into different accounts, creating a trail that would be costly and time-consuming to trace, potentially taking months or even years. By the time anyone might catch up, I planned to be long gone. Back in court, I stood before the unsympathetic judge again, my 60 days almost up in county jail, leaving me with 30 days of a 90-day sentence. "So, have you learned your lesson yet?" she probed with a sneer. "If you mean the lesson about not marrying a cheating spouse, I mastered that lesson long before standing in your courtroom. I meant regarding your attitude in my court," she continued, her forehead vein throbbing with growing irritation. Can't say there was much wrong with my attitude while being railroaded here," I replied coolly. Her escalating anger was becoming increasingly apparent. I'd become concerned if she was managing her blood pressure well. "You know I can extend your sentence, don't you? I'm adding another 30 days. Now, where's your lawyer, and why haven't you made any child support or maintenance payments?" she demanded. It seemed I had overestimated the intellect required to serve as a judge. "Maybe I should break it down for you in simple terms. I'm in jail with no money access. Therefore, I can't make payments. Since it's your decision that landed me here, you might be the reason payments aren't being made." After our exchange, I was escorted back to my cell, now with an additional 90 days added, 30 for each confrontation. Life in jail was bearable. The food was lacking, but I ate it nonetheless. I had a bed to sleep on and plenty of time to relax and exercise. My antics in the courtroom earned me some notoriety and allies. Plus, Hannah's family connections proved useful even inside. There was only one hiccup. One of Scarlett's less savvy cousins thought he'd get himself jailed to teach me a lesson. Inside, everyone already knew who he was and his intentions. Before he even crossed the yard, various accidents befell him. An errant football and unfortunately timed basketball pass. All purely coincidental mishaps. Determined, he continued his approach. Just as he readied a sucker punch, I turned and delivered a swift kick to his midsection, effectively thwarting his attempt. After that, he spent his time in the infirmary and later confined himself to his cell until release. Eventually, I found myself back in front of the unyielding judge. "Ready to apologize for your conduct here?" she inquired. "I'm unaware of any inappropriate conduct to apologize for," I responded. "Perhaps you can keep civil now and shorten your stay," she quipped. "So, a different judge will be presiding then? You're on my last nerve," she snapped. Should I start stomping my feet? I mused. It might be wise to recommend having EMTs on standby for her potential stroke. Again, not a single child support or maintenance payment has been made, nor the mortgage or utilities, she admonished. I believe we've covered this. Jail limits my income abilities. Secondly, the kids aren't mine, so there's no obligation. My ex should support herself, especially after the half-business windfall you gifted her. Your Honor, Scarlett's lawyer interjected. Mr. Miller sold his business to an overseas firm 2 months before filing for divorce. We haven't identified the owners for compliance with the court order. Suddenly, an elegant woman stood up, requesting permission to approach. Your Honor, I represent the purchasing firm's board. I move to dismiss any ruling awarding Mrs. Miller ownership of a business not involved in this case. The transaction predates the divorce filing, rendering any claim by Mrs. Miller void. But what about the money from the sale? Scarlett cried out. The transfer of ownership and payments happened overseas, the representative stated. I'm not privy to the specific details, but the funds from the sale have never entered U.S. territory, placing them outside U.S. jurisdiction. Any claims would need to be addressed with your ex-husband, potentially in the country where the money resides. And which country might that be? Scarlett's lawyer inquired. Initially, the transaction occurred in Belgium, but my understanding is that the money moved elsewhere shortly after. I don't know its current location, she replied. Your Honor, Scarlett's lawyer continued, my client is in dire straits. The mortgage hasn't been paid for 3 months, pushing the house toward foreclosure. The utilities are on the verge of being cut off. Her parents, who initially helped, are now stretched thin. She found work as a waitress, but it's not enough to maintain the house. The judge fixed her gaze on me. Mr. Miller, you have 1 week to catch up on the payments. Oh sure, let me just pull cash out of thin air. Whoops, nothing there. As I've said, I'm physically unable to comply. I'm incarcerated with no money access. Your decisions prevent me from earning any cash, I replied sarcastically. Ask the guards. They check my cell regularly. You demand payments, yet offer no feasible way to make them. I admonish you, Mr. Miller, she snapped. Your lawyer can access your accounts and transfer the funds. As evident, I no longer have a lawyer. And what accounts? You speak of phantom accounts. Where are they? I've repeatedly explained that I'm broke, yet you refuse to accept it. Even if these accounts existed, how would I remember the access information without my financial records? But it doesn't matter because there aren't any accounts. If you believe otherwise, please show me the account details. Narrowing her eyes, the judge asked, what about your checking, savings, and investments? As I explained, a series of poor investment choices wiped them out. And the proceeds from your company sale? The company struggled due to those investments. I sold it cheaply and used the proceeds to settle expenses. No money remains. Mr. Miller, do you expect this court to believe that? I shrugged. Honestly, I'm indifferent to your disbelief. Produce the account information detailing where my supposed wealth is hidden. My theory is she's trying to pin financial losses on me while enjoying her extramarital affairs. That's nonsensical, Scarlett's lawyer protested. About as logical as imprisoning me without money access, demanding payments nonetheless, I retorted. The judge leaned forward with a steely tone. Mr. Miller, I can keep you in jail until you pay. I looked at her incredulously. Sure, because that would make complying with your impossible demands feasible. 3 months passed, and the house was foreclosed. Scarlett lost her Lexus due to non-payment. She moved in with her parents, unable to afford an apartment for herself and the children. She worked part-time at a diner. They petitioned the judge for my release so I could start contributing financially. Her lover had been discharged but was entangled in medical debt and financial ruin. His credit too poor to secure new cards. Eventually, I got a lawyer who negotiated my release so I could find a job and start making payments. Under surveillance and without my passport, I was suspected of hoarding money and being a flight risk. I began working at a local Taco Bell. Living at Owen and Hannah's ranch, I was aware of the surveillance. They had to observe from the road, unaware that most of the cash was already securely in my possession. For the next 3 months, I worked at Taco Bell, from which Scarlett managed to garnish my wages via a court order. Earning minimum wage meant she wasn't receiving much. During this time, I solidified my plans. Owen had cleared out my apartment while I was incarcerated, distributing its contents among my extended family. Recently, several packages from my family were shipped, all going to the same destination. Hannah's family visited frequently, and we hosted barbecues with my relatives. Unnoticed by the surveillance, visitors would discreetly collect packages from the backyard sheds and transport them in their vehicles, which were then repackaged and sent away over the subsequent weeks. I spent my days working or at home, never venturing out. Eventually, Taco Bell sought a restraining order against Scarlett, who regularly disrupted the restaurant, demanding money. Generous tips to my manager ensured I kept my job. Meeting with my new lawyer always took place at the ranch. I hadn't mentioned her yet, had I? She was the one representing the company that purchased my firm in court. After that, I hired her. This lawyer was a force to reckon with, a real shark or perhaps a barracuda. She was sleek, tenacious, and had a surprising appetite for spontaneous poolside encounters. Sure, some might find it unethical for a lawyer to have personal relations with a client, but an ethical lawyer is an oxymoron to some. Lawyers perceive scruples as foreign currency and morals as large wall art. Now, about the funds. Yes, I truly sold my firm, but not to myself. I ensured Scarlett had no chance of claiming any part of it by selling it outright for cash. Conducting the sale overseas kept the money untouchable by U.S. laws. The only way Scarlett could claim any was if I moved it into a U.S. bank, something that wasn't going to happen. It was a substantial sum. My overseas accounts held $10 million, with $200,000 in cash from bank accounts and safes. By then, most of this cash was allocated for my plans, leaving $150,000 on hand, but none would accompany me. On a beautiful Saturday afternoon, we hosted another family barbecue. All preparations were complete. Owen and I manned the grill and smoker. Stella, my lawyer, attended. Later, Hannah's uncle thanked me for helping out and handed me an envelope, which I passed to Stella for safekeeping. That evening, I announced a milestone. Owen and Hannah now owned their ranch outright, with the lien holder declaring the mortgage paid. This sparked a massive celebration, and we enjoyed ourselves thoroughly. As the night wound down, Stella prepared to leave with other departing guests. Her flight, oddly, was set for an airport in the neighboring state. Having packed earlier, she left directly for the airport, never visiting her apartment. No one noticed a man exiting her car in the parking garage, nor the man walking behind her to the international terminal. Theo Miller couldn't leave the country, lacking his passport, but Matthew Thompson's went unchallenged. In first class en route to Mexico City, no one raised an eyebrow as they held hands. Upon arrival, Stella Taylor vanished, while Victoria Thompson joined Matthew Thompson for a connecting flight to Ecuador. 2 days later, Adam and Hannah Baker reached their Costa Rican hacienda. Astonishingly, an old Chevy resembling one missing from Owen and Hannah's ranch awaited them. 2 weeks post-barbecue, a bench warrant was issued for Theo Miller, who had ceased working or making payments. When summoned, Owen and Hannah's high-caliber lawyer argued they bore no accountability for his disappearance. They even pursued back rent. Their story: Theo simply left one day in his old pickup. While skepticism remained, no evidence contradicted them. In the subsequent years, Adam Baker ran a charter fishing service, while Hannah managed their cantina. Their wealth afforded them a comfortable life in the village, where they had one of the more luxurious haciendas. Hosting relatives like Owen and Hannah, they relished their simple yet fulfilling life. Embraced by the community, their generosity left a lasting impact whenever needs arose. It's worth mentioning that Adam regularly played the stock market when he wasn't working on his boat or managing the cantina. He even set up investment accounts for locals, offering financial guidance. As for the infamous Judge Chloe Wilson, I couldn't help but laugh when I heard the news years after settling in Costa Rica. Known for her disdainful demeanor, Judge Wilson was caught in her own scandal. Though she was a lesbian, she was discovered cheating on her wife with a man. Having adopted her wife's 3 children, Judge Wilson found herself unexpectedly responsible for child support, maintenance, and covering the mortgage payments for her now ex-wife. Adding to her embarrassment, the ex-wife soon moved her boyfriend into the house, flaunting their relationship publicly as if married, though they never made it official. Rumor has it they finally set a wedding date strategically planned for just a week after their youngest son graduates from college. Coincidentally, this timing aligns perfectly with the cessation of Judge Wilson's financial obligations, which extend until her ex-wife remarries or the child graduates. Quite the timing, isn't it? Thanks for watching this emotional story of love, lust, and lies. Hope it touched your heart. If you enjoyed it, please like the video, subscribe to the channel, and hit the notification bell so you don't miss a fresh story every day. Love to hear your thoughts in the comments, so feel free to share your experiences and tell your story.